Jon Graber, mixer, producer. I play guitar in NOFX and in the Dancehall Crashers. I've worked with bands like MxPx and Suicide Machines and Goldfinger. Today we're going to check out some OX Sound plugins on a song by the artist Lin Ying and a song called Donovan. I started working at a studio in New York City called Pulse Music. I was an intern there under Chris Davies, working mainly in urban pop, hip hop, and commercial music, mixing a lot of like jingles and things like that. And then from there, I moved to Los Angeles, was trying to get more into producing and mixing punk records and things like that. Eventually ended up working with John Feldman from Goldfinger, and I mixed and produced a bunch of stuff for Goldfinger's last record. That's kind of where a lot of the clients that I kind of picked up and who are interested in doing what I'm doing kind of first heard about me. From there, I did the MxPx live record, Southbound and Down, I think is the name of the record. I owe a lot to Johnny. Feldy really put me in touch with a lot of the clients and put me, at least with the visibility from clients that I was interested in pursuing. And from there, I just kind of rode the wave and ended up here with all of my knobs and my computers and talking to you. So with my approach to OX Sound plugins, pretty much every mixer and producer knows about Soothe. And what I love about Soothe is like the egalitarian aspect of Soothe. You put it on a vocal, it either works or it doesn't. You are chilling out insane harmonic resonance, or that harmonic resonance is pleasing and you don't want to. You can mess around with the mix and you can mess around with how deep the plugin's actually going, but you can hear what it's doing right away. The other aspect of their two other plugins, Bloom and Spiff, is really understanding intent. And what they're asking their users to really do is really understand why they're reaching for a plugin, and not just the utility of like, oh, this is too like taming mid-range. But for Spiff, like often what I'm using Spiff for is gaining back some transient response in things that have been overcooked, or if I'm coming off of a modular rig, just because of the nature of how modular rigs create sound. Modular synthesis is based primarily on voltage and distortion, which doesn't leave much room for transients. And I feel like most music really relies on transients to keep things moving, so you can feel rhythm and things like that. So restoring some of that low-end transients or mid-range transients back into some of the modular stuff in the mix, or even in production, just to help like a singer performance feel better, or to feel like it's dancing more. With Bloom, I am really trying to make pianos as wide and then somehow invisible at the same time as possible without them going away. And the mid-side function of that is pretty fantastic. And the fact that you're not really getting into like compressor world until you're past like 7.0 on the knob, then you start getting into squish world, but it's doing this very awesome corrective EQing in real time. And that can be also, just as a producer while you're listening back, can also be very informative to how you're pushing the mix or how you're pushing the production, because you're seeing where there's room and where there's space. What can you fill in with? What can you pull back with? So that's a lot of the stuff that a lot of the intent behind using the OX Sound plugins as they are right now. And that's just me. I mean, I know a lot of people use Spiff for taming top end on vocals or getting rid of mouth clicks, which is something that I've known it for as well. But getting away from the utility of it and getting more into how you can be expressive with the plugin, I think is like really why I'm constantly going back to a plugin like Spiff. In this song, here, I'll just turn that Spiff off for now. We have these big, really like crazy, like modular drums that are happening over the first verse, and then these bit more distorted ones. And as things kind of get more distorted throughout, we're gonna probably lose a bit more transient response. So what I like to do is kind of go in here and I'll just loop like a little 4-bar of the loop here. I'll open Spiff. So initially when I open Spiff, especially if I'm doing transient kind of backup stuff, I'll open it in Delta mode. So I'm just hearing kind of what are the transients that are really being affected by Spiff, especially if I want to aim it a bit. Like, I don't really think I need to really care about like 140, so I can shave that in a little bit and bring those lows. And maybe I'll also change the shape of that EQ there. Oh yeah. So we're getting more thump out of that. Yeah, especially on that turn around. And that's when I'll start bringing in the actual. Cool. Now let's turn it off. Bypass it. Yeah. Cool. And then from there, I'll kind of just adjust level of taste. That's, you know, a bit louder, definitely, but more low end information that's going to push now. So we'll hear it against the drums. Right, so I'll pull it out. Like, I don't hear the interplay between the two bass drums without it, really. I hear, yeah. So this I get the boom in there, like the punctuation notes kind of in between all of the rhythmic stuff that's going on with the percussion section. And even still, then I'll also bring in the percussion track to make sure that's all working together. As far as, and these are just kind of glitches. So that glitch is like a snare drum with a tambourine on it that we hit and sent through a 404 drum machine. Just kind of plopped it in place so that the drum tracking and the like electronic drums kind of meld a little bit more. And then hearing that in context with everything here. So here's 2 bars for what we were looping. Right. That's without it. I don't hear the intricacies of like what's going on rhythmically. I don't get like the dance as much. Now it might be a little loud, so I might pull that back a little bit. Half DD. Ooh, maybe a little bit more. As those horns are coming in. Cool. So that's like primarily, at least for percussion, how I'm using spiff in the context of like electronic drums. I'll also use it sometimes if I have like a bass drum that's recorded with the kick in like a little too close to get any like subtone out of it. Do some like replacement of sub frequencies with it that way, or aiding sub frequencies. Another great use for it is, you know, on vocals. This is like a little bit more of a common use. If I'm going to use spiff on a vocal, I'll often use soothe first, just because I'm really using it for like reparative stuff.
But it told me that the one and only thing I really owe to me is to be aware.
So we have like a lot of, as you can hear, a lot of like clicking, things like that. We had the microphone that we recorded with was a broken capsule that we broke out of an old like rotary phone. It's Jordan Blackman's. Lynn loved it. It's what she wanted to use. Is actually, this was the scratch vocal. She didn't record a real vocal for it. This was just when we wrote it in the room with Jordan, Lynn, Brandon Benson was there, and so was Reed Woolcott. When we wrote it in the room, this is just how she did it. So, and she loved the performance so much and said that we were like, hey, we don't need to recut it. So here's what I kind of do with soothe on vocals, especially if it's something that's like recorded from a really distorted source. So kind of a similar concept with what I'm doing with spiff. I really like delta mode because I really like to be specific and intentional about what I'm trying to pull out. So I can hear there's like a lot of distortion. You're going to hear a lot of distortion around 500, especially around, and maybe dancing between 500 and 250, just because of the nature of the microphone and also with the proximity of her voice. And then also like the harshness around between 2 and 4K. This 8K spike over here is generally S consonants with soothe. I don't really care that much about that, even though it does look like it's killing it quite a bit. Then we bring that in. So a lot of like the really harshness you can hear kind of being pulled out. I'm still getting quite a bit of mouth clicking, and for that I will use spiff. So same thing, same workflow, delta mode, just hearing where the bubbles on your teeth are popping, where like your lips are smacking, things like that. I'll play with the depth a little bit and then bring it in. As opposed to, I think it just cleans up a bit more. It also preserves all that top end for things like cymbals. And also now I can really go in and be really intentional about what I'm doing with the top end. So if I want to grab an EQ, maybe not that one, but I actually really like these guys. These guys are great. I'll plug them in the video. Why not? This is Make Believe. I love to like kind of pull around the top of the vocal until it really feels like it's dark but present. I don't have all this crazy top end noise. And I can give it a bit more shape too. There you go. And then drop it all in. Get rid of that loop and hear what it's sitting like. I think that sits way better, way less harshness, way more control over where the melody sits, and it's giving me more music and a lot less noise to be fighting with in the mix. Cool, so I have this stereo horn stem in the mix here. You can kind of hear how it's... Gets a little middly, especially if she's not singing in a super high register, she's not pushing, but there's a lot of information happening in those horns. So something I want to try to do is spread it out a little bit. So I love like the mid-side split within Bloom, because you also get these, like, you get your mid control, your side control, and then how much EQ versus how much EQ and compression you're getting. And also the attack and release time situation is pretty fantastic. I generally try to reach for this like the same way I would for like with a setting for like an API 2500. So I really like a super slow attack and a super fast release, as most have been known to do with compressors. So let's hear what this can do now. So let's pull this horn section in here. We're just gonna loop this 4 bars and play with it a little bit. Oh yeah, kind of hear it Bloom a bit more. I'm gonna pull a bit more of that. I'm gonna pull a bit more mid-range out of the center channel as well. Maybe a little higher, around 500. And then for mid-side stuff, I generally want to I love like top stuff and bottom stuff in the sides to be really pushed. And I'm going to push it into like the squish territory, right? So we're starting to get some multi-band compression as well as multi-band EQ. I can really hear like the chorusing. I can really hear the chorusing and the horns around 3K. Let me just see where I'm at now. Yeah. That's very wide and chorusy now. So from there, I'll take that mix knob down to like 50%. So I get some of the spread, but I don't totally lose the character of like how we initially recorded the horns, which is a bit more mono. But we can still kind of fade her in now where we want the vocal to sit as opposed to the horns. And I think we can even now afford to tuck it a little bit. It seems a little bit loud. Maybe drop it a dB.5 and kind of hear how it hits now with the chorus. Yeah, I think they hit really nicely now. They're supporting the stereo image without really getting in the way of where like the action of the vocal really is, and there isn't a ton of low mid-range on the vocal to begin with. So anything we can use to clean up that center section, which like we're ducking 350, that's what I'm going to do with it. I also really like the squash function. I think the compressor on it sounds really cool. That's something I would use Bloom for sure.